Hey there, Brian Mahaney here. Today we're going to talk about the principles of lighting a matchstick. Now, a matchstick, though pretty unpretentious in theory, is actually a pretty brilliant tool. And through the use of fire science basics and physics, things like friction, chemical reaction, flashpoint, firepoint, exothermic reaction, pyrolysis, gasification, combustion, heat transfer, and flame spread, all beautifully are reflected in the lighting of a match and show how the creation and sustainment of the four sides of the fire tetrahedron can be demonstrated pretty simply. First up, the matchstick itself. Now we're talking about safety matches here. Safety matches are designed not to ignite on their own. Each safety match begins as a small piece of wood, often referred to as a splint, and these splints often come from aspen trees. Now the wood, after it's cut into splints, are infused with ammonium phosphate, a chemical that will prevent afterglow. Matchsticks are also often covered in a layer of paraffin wax, which allows the flame to burn down the stick. After the splints are treated, they're then dipped into a chemical compound that creates the colored tip of the match head that's used in the ignition process. The colored tip of the match head itself is actually made up of a number of chemical compounds that are combined and mixed before the splints are dipped in. An oxidizing agent, usually potassium chlorate, as well as sulfur, make up most of the match head. Additionally, though, the match head also contains powdered glass used for friction and glue, which binds all the chemicals together and acts as a fueling agent. The scratch pad is the striking surface most often found on the side of a safety matchbox, where you strike the colored tip of the match to create the ignition. The surface of the scratch pad, like the surface of the match tip itself, also contains powdered glass for friction. More importantly, though, the scratch pad of the safety matchbox also contains red phosphorus. Red phosphorus is needed in the chemical reaction component of the match lighting process because with heat, it reacts with the potassium chlorate and sulfur to create the ignition. Important to the history of safety of matches themselves, red phosphorus is only kept on the scratch pad, not in the mix of the match head chemicals. That makes it so the matches are less susceptible to regular and normal friction, creating accidental ignition. Now, this is what the difference between safety matches and strike anywhere matches are. The main difference between strike anywhere matches and safety matches is that strike anywhere matches contain a small amount of phosphorus in the match tip's head that make them more susceptible to ignition when struck against a rough surface. When a safety match is struck against the scratch pad, the physical and chemical sciences involved in the match's designed process begin to go to work. Though it seems pretty complicated in nature, the process occurs extremely fast. In this slow motion video of the lighting of a match, you'll see all four sides of the fire tetrahedron being built. When the head of a safety match is scratched on the scratch pad, the force of friction begins to take effect. That friction, caused by the match holder striking the scratch pad, allows the powdered glass in both the tip of the match and the scratch pad to rough up against each other in opposite directions. The roughing up caused by the opposing forces created heat, and that heat builds the first wall of the fire tetrahedron. As the heat is created and the first wall is established, other components begin to go to work. The red phosphorus in the scratch pad is able to reach its flash point, ignited by the resulting friction heat. And that red phosphorus flash converts into white phosphorus vapor. Though the white phosphorus vapor burns extremely quickly, the oxidizing agent, the potassium chlorate, allows oxygen to begin to enter the process, thereby establishing the second wall of the fire tetrahedron. As the oxygenation of the chemical reaction begins to take effect, the heated phosphorus and oxidized potassium chlorate allow the sulfur inside the match head to ignite at about 200 degrees Celsius and reach its fire point. The now combusting sulfur allows for the quick pyrolysis and gasification of the aspen wood matchstick, which acts as fuel. And that brings about the third side of the fire tetrahedron, with the wood matchstick now acting as fuel, providing, in essence, food for the fire. The flame will now move up the matchstick, and it can now be noted that the fourth component of the fire tetrahedron, the chemical chain reaction, is now occurring. This is proved by the fact that a consistent pyrolysis gasification combustion reaction is producing heat. Oxygen is in the air surrounding the flame, allowing it to breathe. The resulting exothermic heat preheats the matchstick's wood, allowing radiating heat to transfer, and that radiating heat allows more fuel to burn, continuing the chain reaction. As long as all three elements of the fire triangle, heat, oxygen, and fuel, are allowed to exist under a chemical chain reaction, the fire tetrahedron will continue to occur.